talk about VC investing. Dr. Jain is a physician turned investor, passionate about cutting edge technologies in healthcare and deep tech. Dr. Jain obtained her MBBS from Kasturba Medical College, Manipal, an MS in mechanical engineering from Stanford, and an MBA from the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School. She is a venture capitalist, investor, and a board member at several startups and organizations. Let's welcome Shubhra Jain. Dr. Jain. All yours.
Thank you, Yuli, for having me. Nice to meet everyone. I'm going to share my screen, and please tell me if you can see my screen. Let's see here.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. So this talk is going to be a little bit of a different take from what you heard before with John, because while John was trying to motivate you guys to become angel investors and invest in healthcare technology companies, this is intended more to assist those of you who are starting healthcare technology companies and are going to be fundraising from more institutional investors and venture capitalists. So it's really, I'm assuming, going with the assumption that you're not entirely jumping to the other side and trying to become an institutional venture capitalist. If you are, please ping me separately and we can talk about that. But for the purposes of this conversation, this is essentially meant to give you some tips and tricks for when you go out to the market to fundraise for your startup. So what are you trying to do when you're going out to market to fundraise? Like any process, your goal is to get multiple term sheets in a short window. So essentially generating competitive interest for your startup, because that's the best way that you put yourself in a position of being able to choose the best option for you and for your company. Venture capitalist investors' mandate is very different from an angel investor. These are institutional firms. They have fiduciary responsibility to the people they've raised money from. It's not just some rich person pulling out a checkbook and writing a check. There is more considerations to their desire and ability to invest. They're typically looking for about a 10x return and an exit strategy in 3 to 5 years. So if you are building an amazing business, but you just want to keep running that business and hand it over to your children and your grandchildren and never sell it, a venture capital fundraising model is probably not great for you, because they're going to look to sell the business in 3 to 5 years. That's how they make their return. So this goes to the point of saying, is raising venture capital even the right thing to do? Especially for those of us in the Silicon Valley, we hear about it so much that we think that's the only way to go, which is absolutely not. There are other ways to fund and grow and scale your business, and may or may not be right for you to go the venture capital route. Now, let's assume for those of you who do choose to go the venture capital route, on the right of the slide, I have some just average figures for what a founder goes through when raising a seed round. So assume you are raising a $1.3 million seed round. This is a survey of people who have done that. And in real life, they reach out to about 60 investors. They have about 40 investor meetings. It takes 12 weeks. Mind you, this is pre-COVID. It has taken people much longer or shorter, depending on your previous reputation, your location. Is this your first company? So COVID has really changed some of these numbers for sure. A pitch deck typically has about 19 slides. In my opinion, that's a lot for a seed raise. I'll talk a little bit more about how to build your pitch deck in a later slide. An investor on an average spends 3 minutes and 44 seconds on a deck. So even if you extrapolate that to 4 minutes and 20 slides, you're getting 20 seconds on a slide. It's much better to have a smaller number of slides that are more thoughtfully done. Your fundraising ability will depend on the stage of the business, what milestones have you accomplished, what are you doing in revenue, what points can you emphasize to claim credibility in front of an investor. When choosing an investor, there are a couple of things to be mindful of. Too many people, fundraising is hard, and fundraising is a slog for anybody and everybody, especially during these difficult times that we're in. So it's very easy to get drawn into accepting the first check that you get because you've been working hard, you've been slogging it out for the last 18 weeks. Now you finally have a term sheet from someone. You're just like, I just want to be done and go back to building my business. But it's really, really important to think carefully about who you are getting into a partnership with. It's a very long-term partnership. These people are going to stay with you for the entire trajectory of your company until you sell the business. And sometimes they're going to control your ability to sell the business or to partner with a potential acquirer or merger. So you have to think long term and make sure that their view for the business is aligned with yours and that you have a cultural fit with them. You will be interacting with them over several board meetings. So unlike angel investors who might put a check in and then just wait for the company to do whatever they do, VC investors mostly will take some kind of control clause legally, and often that involves board seats, which would mean at least once a quarter you're going to see their face and spend 3 hours with them in the boardroom. And if your views and theirs or your working style and theirs is not aligned, those are going to be very painful board meetings. So you want to work with someone who sees eye to eye with you and with whom you really enjoy working, right? Like you're probably going to build 1 to 3 businesses in your lifetime at the most. And you're giving this an inordinate amount of investment from your life. How to reach out to a VC. So the initial outreach, fortunately, in the world of social media and digitalization, this has become more easy than it was ever before. In a lot of ways, VC is an inbound business, and a lot of us really want to have an online presence, really want to market ourselves and tell the world what we are looking for. Because it's virtually impossible for me to go and look at every telehealth deal in every part of the world or every mental health company that anyone might be building in their garage, right? Like, and my job is to find these deals. So the best way for me to find these deals is to let the world know that this is what I am looking for and attract the right set of people to come to me. And so you will find a ton of information about most investors on social media, online, conferences, events. We talk, we present, we share our thoughts. We will often have detailed investment thesis blog posts about what do we believe in, what are we looking to invest in. So we're not hard to find. We are hard to engage, though, I would say, just because we get so much inbound. So you really have to figure out what is your unique angle. Maybe you have something in common with them. Maybe you've really deeply looked at a problem that they have looked at and can offer something of value. In your first outreach, you want to be really concise. You want to pack a lot of very relevant information. And look, your startup is your baby and you're obviously in love with it, but we understand that. And we don't mean to say that any particular company is good or bad, but things like customer testimonials, media coverage are, for example, much less helpful in gaining an investor's interest than hard metrics. We sold this much in software. We are operating at this margin. We have XYZ customers interested in us. So more of your traction metrics, anything that you can say to borrow credibility. This is my third company. I worked in this space before. 25 really good people from XYZ companies have chosen to join us because we're building the next big thing. Any of those things are really much more valuable than some news article covering you or some customer writing 2 lines of a testimonial. So choose carefully what you want to share in that initial outreach, because that will really determine if you get a response, and that will be the beginning of a relationship. So you want to always start on the right foot. Pitch deck. I had promised I will come back to this and talk a little bit about pitch deck. So the most important thing about the pitch deck, if you don't take away anything else from this conversation, is that you need to have multiple versions of it. You need to have a short version that you can present and a short version that you can send. The difference between these two is going to be the one you send is going to have much more text on it so that people have less room for interpretation, because you're not going to be in the room to clarify and to give a verbal explanation on each slide. So while it could be the same number of slides, they're probably a little bit more text heavy than the one you present. And then you should have definitely a master deck that it answers every question you've ever been asked. It's always helpful to answer with data and figures and show that you've been thoughtful and you've learned from your previous pitch meetings, interactions, customer conversations, and you're bringing all of that knowledge with you. And not that you want to inundate them or overwhelm with them with that information. That's why you started with the smaller pitch deck or shorter pitch deck, but you have it all in your back pocket, and you can pull up an appendix and pull up a slide that answers exactly the question they're going to ask. And by the way, if you don't have a pre-prepared answer to the question that you're being asked, you can always say, I will get back to you. But really the key is to get back within 24 hours. You want to be responding that evening with, hey, thank you for taking the meeting. I really thought about what you asked, and here are the 3 ways I'm thinking about. Even if you may not have an absolute answer, but you can essentially illustrate your thought process and share how you would go about solving that problem or addressing that question, and say, is it okay if I follow up within a week with a more researched, well thought out answer? And most people would welcome that. What should your pitch deck actually have? So you have seen at least 3 of these today and several before. I think there were a number of things that the teams that presented today did very, very well. Almost all of them had a team slide, although my bias personally is that the team slide should come first, especially if you are pre-seed stages. If you've never raised an institutional round before, you're essentially looking to borrow credibility. As an institutional investor, why should I sit and listen to the next 50 minutes of your pitch? And it's because it's like when you walk into a room and introduce yourself, right? Like you say, hey, I am XYZ. This is where I work. This is what I do. So it's like introducing yourself. When you are presenting your company, the first step naturally would be to introduce the company and introduce the people behind the company. The next thing to tell people is, what are you building? So what problem are you solving, and why should I care about it? If this is a very niche problem that hardly anybody has, or a very small number of people have this problem, which especially as a particular type of investor I cannot relate with, I may not be interested in listening to the rest of the pitch, because I'm like, I have never faced this problem. I've never met anybody in life who has faced this problem. So is this even a real problem? So your first job is to establish that you're solving a problem that enough number of people face in the world or in the geography that you're addressing. And it's a huge problem. It's like ideally in their top 3 pain points. So if you're solving a problem for an OBGYN, then when I go talk to an OBGYN, they better list this problem in their top 3 problems, because if it's too far down the line, then your ability to be able to engage your target user group is going to be very limited. So that's essentially what we're looking for when we talk about the unmet need or the problem that you're solving. The second piece is market size, which relates intimately to defining the problem. And our friend John talked about this a little bit in terms of total addressable market. What we're trying to essentially say here is take it a little bit further than the problem and say, okay, I am solving the problem of infertility for women in age group 35 to 45. There's X million women in the US who suffer from this problem, and they are each willing to pay, I'm just making this up, $1,000 a month to be able to solve this. And so that's your market size. If you have 1,000 women who are willing to pay $1,000 a month, then you have $1 million a month market, which is huge. So that's what we call bottoms-up market sizing, what I just did for you, back of the envelope. Essentially, who's your target group? How many of those people exist? What are they willing to pay? You multiply those 2 numbers and you get your bottoms-up market size. This is an exercise that every investor will do, and it will demonstrate a lot of insight if you've done this beforehand before presenting it to them. The acronyms here are just a bunch of business jargon, which is total addressable market, serviceable market, and immediately addressable market, essentially. So I'm not going to go into the in-depth definition of each of them, but essentially it's about what percentage of the market can you actually reach. There might be 1 billion women in the entire world suffering from infertility, but if you're a US-based company, you're probably reaching only the women in the US, or some of them might be illiterate and you're only probably reaching the ones who can speak and understand English. So that's essentially what we're trying to do here with TAM, SAM, and SOM in terms of segmenting the market further and identifying what is the real addressable market that you can reach. The fourth one on here is product. So what are you building? And for a lot of really early stage companies, you may not have a built out product yet. You may have what we call an MVP, which again, John addressed, a minimum viable product, which is essentially something that works. Maybe you've put it together with duct tape and wires, and it's not pretty and fancy yet, but it does the job. If we think about like a really crude door stopper, it just does the job. It may not look like a fancy door stopper that you would buy at a store. So that's what we call a minimum viable product, something like that. Or maybe you don't even have that, but maybe you have a prototype or a demo that is just digitally put together, or it's a drawing on paper even. Whatever you got. It's very helpful to talk to an investor with some illustrations rather than you just trying to describe it. So if you have a picture, if you have a crude prototype, bring it along in the meeting. People really like to engage with the product. There is a tactile and a perceptive element to it. The second thing that we look for in product is maybe you don't have everything built out yet, but you probably have a roadmap to getting there. So what are you going to need? What capabilities are you going to need? What is your timeline to getting to a finished product? So show us your roadmap. A lot of the pitch is about letting the investor on the inside and showing to them what is going on in your head. How are you envisioning building this company? And giving them sort of an insider's perspective on that. The fifth one is business model. This is especially complicated in the world of healthcare, right? Because healthcare is the only thing where it's not always direct to consumer. People who consume it don't always buy it. So it's very helpful to understand who are you going to sell to and what do you expect them to pay for it. You could be selling to pharma companies or selling to a payer or an insurance company, in which case you need to have an established reimbursement code and a path to reimbursement. If you are going direct to consumer, you want to see how much will you be charging these consumers? Is it a one-time fee? Is it a subscription? Is it a freemium model where they get something for free before they start paying? So talk a little bit essentially about how are you going to make money? That's in layman terms, that's what business model means.
Hey, Shubhra, time check.
Sure, I will go faster on the rest of them. Competitive landscape is pretty self-explanatory. Who are your competitors? What are they doing? How do you differentiate yourself from them? Market traction, again, depends on what kind of company you're building. Essentially, the idea is giving some proof that somebody wants to pay for your product. Financials, probably not super important if you're a pre-seed stage company, but we still want to see that you've given this some thought, some high-level back-of-the-envelope financials. Regulatory or reimbursement path is important depending on what kind of company you are. If you're going through an FDA approval process, you need to have a strategy for it. Fundraise. So this is a very important one. A lot of companies will pitch their entire company, but never tell me why are they here? What are they asking for? How are they going to use this money? If I meet them 2 years later, what should I be looking for in terms of milestones? And then there are some extra things that you can do to differentiate yourself. For example, addressing potential risks about investing in your business. This is, again, a nice to have, but not a necessary one. With this, I am going to stop and take questions.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see what questions we have here in the chat. Divya had a question about, Divya, go ahead, ask.
I feel like I'm dominating the Q&A. Wonderful presentation. I've always wondered about team slide at the beginning or end. I understood what you said about pre-seed. What about the issue if you haven't even introduced what the company is about, what it is you're trying to build, your vision, how to scale? How do you know that the team is actually well suited for the company itself?
We don't. And ideally, before I open the deck, I am seeing an email from somebody that highlights in 2 or 3 bullet points, this is who we are, this is what we are building. And so I know whether to open the email and look at the deck. But if that is not the case, I would still want to know who are the people behind the company before I even know anything else about the company, because at these early stages, we are betting on people more than anything else. The product will change, the problem they're solving will often change, companies pivot all the time. But really it's more about the team and can you trust them and do they have credibility, and do you think that they're going to be good founders and entrepreneurs and will be able to figure it out.
Great. Paula asks, what advice would you give to female founders when they're raising money?
Certainly, and I see this a lot. I talk about this a lot. I've done other talks about how female founders are different when they pitch. My single point of advice would be more aggressive. Do not be afraid to share your ambitious vision instead of your conservative vision. I think female founders often are afraid of not being able to fulfill what they're promising, and hence they will err on being more conservative when promising. While the difference is that when we see a non-diverse white male founder who's pitching, they will often jack everything up by 50% over what they believe in, and we just have to take a haircut of 30% on everything they're saying. And as an investor, since those are most of the pitches we see, if you don't have a diverse investor in the room, they're probably giving you a 30% cut even on your most conservative estimate. So you are better off presenting the more ambitious version, and you can highlight the risks involved in achieving it, but I would still err on the side of being more aggressive.
Great answer. Let's see, how did you get involved in VC work?
That's a very long story. I was on the operating side before I trained as a physician. I was interested in startups and tech and entrepreneurship. I was on the operating side, built products for a software as a service company in the health tech for a little while, worked with a team of engineers, had a really fulfilling experience, and got to see them fundraise from the other side of the table and thought it was really cool what these people were doing and really wanted to switch into investing. I am very excited about innovation and entrepreneurship, really love working operationally with founders, which is why I chose to go into early stage private investing, because I want to be involved with these companies. Some of my most enriching experiences have come from board meetings that I have been in, and being able to partner with entrepreneurs and live vicariously through them, honestly, as they build these businesses.
So do you just go and apply for a job at a VC firm and say that I want?
That's one way to do it. There are many paths to becoming a venture capitalist. So that's the beauty of this career path. I feel there are many paths to success. There are journalists who have gone and become venture capitalists. There are lawyers who have gone and become venture capitalists. I am an example of a doctor who has gone and become a venture capitalist. So there is no school program that you can go to for 2 years and then go become a VC. It's really about what you're passionate about and how can you leverage your unique strengths and background to add value to these companies. Essentially, becoming a VC is all about founders wanting to work with you. And if a founder wants to take a meeting with me and believes that I can say something or guide them towards something or make a valuable introduction for them, then that's what puts me in business.
Great. Derek asks, can you share your slides? Yes, this presentation is being recorded, so we will have the recording for all the attendees. Great presentation, Dr. Jain. Do you know any good angel or VC funds that tend to like female founders?
That tend to like female founders. There's a lot of conversation about this. There are a lot of funds that have a focus on investing in diverse founders. Unshackled is one that is especially interested in immigrant founders. Hustle Fund does a lot of VC female founders. There are specifically lawyers who want to work with female founders. If you're starting a company and you're looking for a corporate lawyer, please feel free to reach out to me over email. I'm just going to put my email here, and I can guide you to some resources for diverse founders. I'm happy to do that.
Great. Thanks, Faye. She put a link to a blog which has VC jobs openings. Great forum. And Sharad Mishra, he's talking about our fund has patient advocates who are now VCs. Wow, that's nice, Sharad. Thank you. There are several VC founded companies. What are your thoughts on solo founders? Frowned upon by VCs?
No, I don't think they're frowned upon by VCs. Look, I mean, founding a company is a hard thing to do. It's probably one of the hardest things that you will do in your lifetime. And it can be great. It can be good to have a partner if you have the right one. It's kind of like getting married to someone, right? Like it's wonderful to share the joys of life with someone and the challenges as well, if you are with the right person. But if you're not, they can make your life hell. So I wouldn't partner up with someone just to get VC interest or think that that will sit better with VCs. I cannot tell you how many co-founder therapy sessions we do as investors in board meetings, and nobody wants to do that. So if you find the right partner and you're excited about building this with them and sharing a huge part of your life with them, and you think that they bring true value, absolutely do it. And I think it will be more fulfilling, more rewarding, just a little bit easier in the rough times with somebody else. But that said, if you have the conviction to build something, if you think that this is your life's work, if you're truly motivated and passionate about solving a problem, I wouldn't wait to find a partner or co-founder, or by any means shoot yourself down saying you will have a harder time fundraising or even building a company without one. There are plenty of examples of people who have built great businesses, long-lasting businesses, all by themselves. And by the way, once you start, there will be people who follow you. So your co-founder doesn't necessarily have to be with you from day one. Maybe you do this work for a year and then somebody comes in and they may or may not have the co-founder title, but maybe they're your right hand in building the business. But if you never started, maybe they wouldn't have ever come along. So I wouldn't let that hold you back.
Great. Faye Sahai says, nice to meet you all, part of Vinaj Ventures. Derek says, I'm in the process of reading the Doximity IPO prospectus. I'm considering making an investment. Any additional insights on that? Shubhra?
I haven't read the Doximity docs, so I think John may be in a better position to take this one if he's more familiar with it. I'm not really in the loop on this one.
John?
I'm actually afraid I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not as familiar with it yet as I should be. I just got their email recently and haven't had the time to go through it yet.
Great. All right. Let's see. All right. Any other questions? There's a lot of messages, so I'm trying to go through these.
Yeah, and I put my email in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to me if I can be helpful with diverse founders or resources for you guys.
Okay, question for Paula. UberDoc, are you looking for investors? I think Paula is.
Oh, hello. Yes. So I was actually just emailing Shubhra. So great talk. So this is actually quite opportune because you finished your seed round, which was a challenge, I mean, just going through, but now moving into the next phase, especially UberDoc direct to consumer, we have explosive growth. We need to find the right strategic partner, but we have to also tell the right story. And I found that, as you evolve, when you have your company at the beginning, the mission always remains the same, but the story changes a little bit, the way you tell the story. So now I've been struggling actually with my next deck. I had a great conversation yesterday. It was the first time an investor actually said to me, wow, you are successful because. I said, what? I got a positive. And so now I realized that I was just trialing a new pitch, and now I've got to put it into a new deck. And I'm just like struggling with the deck. I've made about 42 decks over the past 5 years, and I just want to, not that you hang everything on a deck, but it really is for me. It's a point. It's a way of it's a talking point, right? And sharing decks with people. So I actually reached out to you. Would you review decks, because that is really a challenge. You get all sorts of advice, but basically you want to be able to tell your story. And I find myself really making it much simpler. Like, strangely enough, it's not as complex as it was. I'm not having to pitch or tell. I don't have to tell my story or convince anyone anymore, because we have the traction. It's just a matter of where you see the vision.
Well, I disagree with that last statement, Paula, though. No matter how much traction you have, it's still very important to tell your story the right way. You want to make sure that people take away the right things from it, and you find the kind of partner that you are looking for. Just because people are looking at numbers, you don't want greedy investors, so to say, right? Like, you don't want someone investing in you just because they saw a big pop-up number. So I think telling the story is always very important. I do offer some pitch feedback and deck feedback. So please reach out to me on my email and we'll see what we can do, or I'll guide you to a resource for that. Pitch decks are very, very important because, as I said, a lot of times they will get forwarded no matter how confidentially. So first of all, take it for granted that people are sending it out to each other. And they need to be able to stand out on their own. You may not always be in the room to be able to give context. So be very, very careful and thoughtful about what you put on there. And it is a very easy way to destroy credibility, to be honest. If you put an advisor on there and I pick up the phone and call the advisor and they say, hey, I work with 50 companies, I don't know which one this company is, that instantly destroys your credibility. I think my one piece of advice to everyone on this call would be to take the pitch seriously and take the initial interactions with investors very seriously, because you may not have the benefit of a long-term relationship to be able to correct the impression that you made in the first meeting.
Great advice. Shubhra, what do you think of part-time founders? Sharad asks.
I don't invest in them. I think most institutional investors will not invest in them. I had an hour-long conversation actually today with a partner of a law firm about this afternoon at lunch. And unless they are doing a job that is directly additive to the company, so if you are a 20% academic appointment professor at Stanford and it helps you get non-dilutive funding and grants that are in the same line as what the company is doing, or you have this credibility to have access to resources at Stanford or Berkeley, fine, maybe that's okay. But in very exceptional cases, mostly by the time, it's okay to do this in very, very early stages when you're raising angel rounds, by the way. But by the time you get to an institutional investor, they will want to see a serious commitment. And at the very least, they will give you a term sheet on the terms that if you close this round, then you quit your job and come on full-time on the company. As an institutional investor, I will not invest in a founder that is doing 2 companies or 3 jobs and things like that. Nothing against people hustle and make it work. It may not be the right route for you to raise VC money if you're trying to do that.
Great. Well, we are coming to the end of our program. Thank you very much, Shubhra.